The humiliation at gate D17. Let go of the casket, sir, you're holding up operations. The voice was cold-clipped and carried the sharpness of someone too young to understand what they were interrupting. The man being spoken to didn't flinch. He was tall, late 60s, a Marine's back, even if his knees no longer marched. White hair combed straight back. A worn, faded dress blue uniform clung to his frame like a second skin. His name tag read R. Decker. But nobody saw that yet. What they did see, what made the air in gate D13 thicken with discomfort, was his hand. That old veined gloved hand resting firm and unmoving on top of a flag-draped casket. Raymond Decker had not spoken a word since the plane landed. A young VA coordinator, Reed Marston, barely 30, was already flushed with annoyance. The delay was affecting other passengers. Gate change, baggage bottleneck, and now this. Reed stepped closer, invading the quiet around the casket. I said, "Step back," he repeated louder. "You're not authorized to handle military cargo. You're not even on this manifest." He reached forward, fingers twitching toward the flag. And in that instant, a wave of silent collective dread passed over the terminal. Passengers were still, coffee cups midair, no one moved. Then in a moment so disrespectful, it would ripple across the internet within hours, Reed shoved Decker. It wasn't violent, but it was enough. Decker stumbled, his right foot scuffed back. One gloved hand briefly left the flag, and just like that, 67 years of dignity cracked. No one helped him regain his footing. No one intervened. Just one woman in a Navy stewardess blazer, Ava Collins, stood frozen with her clipboard pressed to her chest. Her eyes locked on him. He straightened again, slowly, silently. Then, with the grace of a man who had folded too many of those flags in silence, he returned his hand to where it belonged, centered across the stars and stripes. TSA agents approached. "If he touches the flag again, we'll detain him," one of them whispered to Reed. Reed nodded slightly. "Sir, you're delaying operations. This isn't a funeral home. This is a functioning airport." Raymond didn't respond. Because this wasn't cargo. This was Corporal Lucas West, 23, killed during a humanitarian convoy operation in Sudan. He had trained with Raymond, ate with him, called him Old Man Marine, and swore he'd beat his record on the range. Raymond had watched him grow into a soldier, and when Lucas had asked who he'd want if the worst happened, he said, "You, Sergeant D. I don't trust anyone else to bring me home." So here he was. And the airport had no idea what it was trying to interrupt. Raymond Decker wasn't blocking operations, he was keeping a promise. Now pause. If you're watching this and you've ever witnessed someone dismiss the weight of a folded flag, what would you have done here? Would you have spoken up? Would you have recorded it? Or would you, like most, have looked away? Tell us in the comments below. What do you see when you see a man in uniform holding a casket at an airport? Comment one word: respect. If you believe someone should have stepped in sooner, because what happened next, America would not forget. The TSA agents were less than 5 feet away now. Tension in the air. Reed motioned again, this time with more certainty. Raymond blinked slowly, but his hand, it didn't move. That's when Ava Collins stepped closer. She didn't say anything, but her eyes darted to the TSA men, then to the casket, then back to Raymond. "I think," she hesitated, "I think he's a military escort." Reed scoffed. "There's no official paperwork. This was supposed to be a direct transfer. He's not on the list." Another TSA officer cracked his knuckles. "Sir, one last warning." Raymond looked up, eyes like glacier glass, pale blue but burning. "This man," he said softly, voice dry but firm, "is not cargo. He is a Marine. And I don't leave Marines behind." No one responded. The terminal was frozen. Then footsteps, heels clicking on tile. Measured, confident. From gate D20, a woman in uniform appeared. Not just any woman. 4 stars on her shoulder. Major General Evelyn Grant. Passengers began to whisper. She didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "Clear the terminal." Her voice had the weight of command that makes you stop breathing for a moment. "That man," she continued, pointing at Raymond, "is not to be touched." All eyes turned. Reed's mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a schoolboy caught mocking his teacher. General Grant approached slowly, her medals glinting under terminal lights. She took off her hat, stepped right beside Raymond, and saluted. Every phone was out now, not to record shame, but to remember honor. Raymond's hand didn't move, but his eyes, wet now, met hers. She whispered, barely loud enough, "I thought you were dead." He didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. In that moment, the airport fell silent, but the truth finally stood up. The name that returned after 19 years, that's Master Sergeant Raymond Decker. He once carried me on his back out of a burning convoy. The words struck the air like a slow explosion. General Evelyn Grant had spoken them with quiet finality, but the silence that followed made the entire terminal forget how to breathe. Reed Marston, the VA coordinator who had just ordered Decker to step away from the casket, took a small step back. His mouth opened as if to deny it, but no sound came out. All the confidence in his pressed shirt and regulation lanyard dissolved into the floor beneath him. Passengers turned. Someone whispered, "Did she say General Grant didn't flinch?" She didn't explain. She walked forward with the solemn stride of someone who had worn dress blues at too many funerals. Her hand was already rising, the salute formed clean, sharp, and full of weight. She held it unmoving as if time itself paused with her. Decker's hand still rested on the flag, steady as it had been from the first moment. But something changed in his face. Not surprise, not pride, just recognition. Like a man who never needed anyone to stand up for him, but now that someone didn't quite know how to let that in. Ava Collins, the flight attendant, whispered under her breath, "What is happening?" One of the TSA agents lowered his arm. The other took a full step back, and then came the question that twisted everything. A little boy, maybe 7, holding his mother's hand, asked, "Why is the lady saluting the old man?" His voice wasn't mocking, just curious, pure. And every adult in earshot felt the same question pierce them like a quiet thunderbolt. The general finally spoke again. Not to Decker, not to the crowd, to the coffin. "I know who he's carrying," she said, "and I know what this means." Then she looked around the terminal, letting her voice grow just enough to travel. "Master Sergeant Decker saved my life 19 years ago in Basra. I was bleeding, pinned under a truck, and enemy fire was closing in. He didn't run, he didn't flinch. He carried me through fire with a bullet in his own leg." She turned her head to the passengers, to the TSA, to Reed. "And now he's doing it again, carrying one of his own through fire, for the last time." Someone gasped. A woman, maybe a mother, maybe a Marine wife, the kind of gasp that wasn't for show, the kind you don't plan. An older gentleman in a Vietnam veteran hat stood up from his seat. His knees cracked, but he stood, hand over heart, silent. Then another man stood, and another. Within seconds, the entire waiting area of Gate D-San was on its feet. Nobody had told them to. But something ancient, something buried deep in the bones of anyone who has ever lost someone in uniform, told them it was time. And in that sea of silence, a voice broke through. It was Ava. She stepped forward, her clipboard falling to the ground. "I saw him here last year," she said. "Same posture, same hand on a different casket. I thought he was part of airport staff. I never asked." Her voice cracked. "I should have asked. If you're still watching, let me ask you something. How many veterans have passed you by, silent, worn eyes cast down? And you didn't ask if this story is reminding you of someone, a father, a brother, a friend. Type the word honor in the comments. Because some names never make it onto statues, but they deserve to be remembered. General Grant turned to the TSA agents whose hands were now resting against their belts, unsure. "This terminal is under federal jurisdiction," she said calmly. "I am assuming responsibility for the transfer of this casket. And Master Sergeant Decker is to proceed uninterrupted." Reed Marston opened his mouth again, then stopped. A passenger behind him muttered, "Let it go, man." Reed's face was tight, ashamed, confused. He checked his phone, likely to verify Grant's identity, as if the truth could be denied by paperwork. And then another unexpected moment. From the gate on the far side, Gate D15, a group of Marines, 5 of them active duty, walked forward in full-dress uniform. They weren't scheduled to be there. They weren't assigned to the escort. But one of them, a tall black sergeant named Howard, stepped up to Decker, saluted and said simply, "We're walking with you, Master Sergeant." Decker didn't respond with words, but his eyes closed for a moment, and when he opened them again, they glistened. Even General Grant blinked more than once. The honor march hadn't even begun, but something was already changing. A unity, a silence, a line being drawn in the soul of that airport. Reed turned and walked toward the staff door, shoulders, low eyes, no longer sharp. And just as he disappeared from sight, Decker finally spoke. 3 words. I'm still carrying no explanation, no context, but the way he said it, like it was both a burden and a calling, everyone in that terminal understood. And they didn't just understand, they respected it, they felt it, they followed it. This was no longer a disruption to operations. This was the kind of operation only the heart remembers. So if you believe stories like this matter, if you want to make sure no veteran stands alone at the gate, hit the subscribe button. Not for us, but for men like Decker, for memories like Lucas, for the promises that don't end when the war does. And some thought Decker died in 2008, but now they'll see what he's still fighting for. And the next words spoken will change everything. We thought he died in '08. None of us knew he was still alive. To be continued. The ones who came back. We thought he died in '08. None of us knew he was still alive. The voice came from a man leaning on a cane, wearing a faded Marine's cap and a jacket with the 2nd Battalion patch. His name tag read Harper, but that detail didn't matter. What mattered was the tremble in his voice, the disbelief in his eyes, and the fact that when he saw Raymond Decker standing tall beside that flag-draped casket, he dropped everything and whispered like seeing a ghost. Harper wasn't alone. 3 more veterans were with him. One rolled forward in a wheelchair, jaw tight, as if swallowing 20 years of guilt. Another stood stiff as a board hand over his heart, tears running into the grooves of his cheeks. They had all served under Decker at Camp Lejeune, and every one of them thought he had died in Iraq in 2008. Master Sergeant Decker, the man in the wheelchair, said, eyes wide, "We searched for his name on every memorial wall. I swore I saw it. But there he was, not dead, not buried, just forgotten, and now standing in front of them, escorting a casket, like it was the only thing left that tethered him to this world." The terminal stayed silent. The kind of silence that only comes when truth collides with memory. One of the younger Marines, Sergeant Howard, turned to the group and said, "You knew him?" Harper nodded slowly. "He trained us. He made us men. He saved us more times than we deserved." The general glanced toward Raymond, then back at the men. "How did he disappear?" The answer came from Harper. "He didn't disappear. He just never came home. His last request was to take the body of Corporal Benson back to the family in Nebraska. The vehicle got hit. Everyone assumed he was gone. No body, no press release, nothing, just gone." Howard stared. and he never corrected the record. Harper's face twisted with guilt. He wasn't the kind of man to raise his hand and say, "Look at me." He just faded. I guess he figured the mission mattered more than the recognition. Ava Collins, still standing by the wall, took out her phone, not to record, to search, and within seconds the story unraveled. Photos surfaced, grainy ones from smaller funerals across the country, quiet escort ceremonies, always the same tall man in the background, blue uniform, gloves, never speaking. He'd been there for dozens, maybe more. Every casket, every folded flag, every forgotten name, he had made sure they got home, and no one had made sure he did. Reed Marston reappeared at that moment as if summoned by karma. His jacket was half-buttoned, his expression raw. He looked not like an official anymore, but a man who realized he had just shoved history. He walked slowly to General Grant, lowered his head, and whispered, "I didn't know." Grant didn't answer. Reed stepped forward toward Raymond. He looked at the casket, then the glove, then Raymond's face. "I thought you were just an old man standing in the way." Raymond didn't blink. "That's the problem," the old Marine said, voice like gravel and steel. "People only see the age, not the wars behind it." Reed nodded, mouth open to speak again, but couldn't find the words, so he stepped back. And in that moment, someone behind the gate doors began to hum a soft, familiar tune. "Country roads, take me home." The voice was shaky but recognizable. It was the older man in the wheelchair. Lucas's favorite song, the one he hummed after missions, the one Decker remembered from years ago, and now somehow someone else remembered too. Raymond's shoulders stiffened. Then for the first time his lips moved in rhythm. He hummed. And one by one people around the gate joined, a soft, reverent chorus that spread through terminal descentine like a prayer. They weren't singing to perform. They were singing because a soldier was going home, and the man walking him there had already brought home too many. If you're still with this story, let us ask you something from the heart. How many Raymond Deckers are out there right now if you believe some heroes never stop serving? Comment the word "still standing" and don't forget to follow this channel for more stories like this one. Because we don't just tell stories, we bring dignity home. As the last verse of Country Roads faded, Raymond turned to the group of veterans and gave a single nod. They fell in behind him, Harper in the front, cane shaking, the man in the wheelchair beside him saluting. Sergeant Howard flanked the other side. No orders were given. No command shouted, but they walked like a unit again. And the people parted. Airport staff stood still. TSA agents stepped aside. Even the janitor lowered his mop. This wasn't just a man escorting a casket. It was history marching through a terminal. Ava followed at a distance, eyes wet, heart pounding. Raymond didn't speak again. He didn't have to. Because in every step, every breath, every memory echoing in that space, he was speaking, not with words, but with honor. And just before the escort reached the terminal doors, the automatic glass panels slid open and the cool morning light poured in. Standing just beyond the threshold was a small group, a woman maybe late 40s holding a single white rose. Next to her, a teenage girl gripping an American flag, and behind them, a man in civilian clothes, hands trembling. It was Lucas's family. The woman took one step forward, eyes locked on the flag. Then she saw Raymond. Her knees buckled. But before she hit the floor, Raymond stepped forward and caught her gently. She didn't cry, not at first. She just stared at him, whispered something so soft only the people closest could hear. "I didn't know you were real." Raymond didn't answer. He simply placed her hand on the casket and said, "I promised I'd bring him home." The camera never zoomed. The phones didn't move. Because no one dared interfere. The moment belonged to them. and the man who never stopped marching, to be continued. The road back for the forgotten man. This isn't ceremony. This is repentance from a country that forgot its finest. The words came not from Raymond Decker, but from General Evelyn Grant. She said them low, steady, standing just behind him as he guided the casket through the automatic doors of Terminal D-17. The early morning light poured over them like judgment. Behind them, passengers stood frozen. Ahead, the family of Corporal Lucas West waited, hearts cracked open by grief, faces painted with reverence. Raymond walked slow, each step deliberate, never breaking the contact of his right hand on the flag. To the casual onlooker, he looked like an old soldier. To those who had seen what happened inside that terminal, he looked like a man pulling the weight of 2 decades of silence and carrying a whole country's conscience on his back. The airport fell behind them like a dream no one could quite believe they had witnessed. The motorcade was ready, but no one moved yet. Then something unexpected happened. A young woman stepped forward from the crowd of onlookers, civilian clothes, short haircut, nervous hands. She looked no older than 25. She didn't speak at first, just walked to Raymond and opened a folder. Inside was a newspaper clipping, yellowed and torn. Camp Lejeune, 2004. "You trained my father," she said. "You saved him. He died 3 years later from PTSD. But he always said one name with pride. Decker." She paused. "I just needed to see if you were real." Raymond didn't speak. He just met her eyes. And for a brief moment, something flickered in his. Not recognition, but the pain of too many names remembered by too few. The woman nodded, wiped her eyes, and stepped back. The moment was personal, but the crowd made it sacred. Then came the family. Lucas's mother, Joanna, stood beside the casket and looked at Raymond with the haunted eyes of a woman who had never truly slept since her son deployed. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the side of the casket like it might dissolve if she wasn't careful. "I begged him not to go," she whispered. Raymond's voice was quiet. "I told him he'd come home." Joanna looked up at him, searching for something in his face. Anger, blame, forgiveness. She found none of those. What she found was a man who had kept a promise the world forgot he made. The teenage girl, Lucas's younger sister, stepped forward. Her hands clutched a folded letter. She didn't speak. She just handed it to Raymond. Inside were 6 words. "Thank you for not leaving him." That's when Raymond did something no one expected. He removed his glove. The hand was scarred, sun-darkened, bruised by time and war. He placed it over the flag once more, bare skin on cloth, then reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. He held it toward Joanna. "I wrote this the day after he died," he said. "Didn't know if I'd ever deliver it." Joanna took it like she was holding the last piece of her son she'd never known she needed. Then Raymond began to fold the flag. Perfect corners, no creases, no haste. Each fold was a sentence left unsaid, each motion a breath held. When it was done, he placed the triangle in Joanna's hands. "He wasn't alone," Raymond said, "and he wasn't forgotten. Not by me." She broke. Not into sobs, into silence. The kind of collapse that doesn't need sound to destroy you. A few people turned away, not out of disrespect, but because the rawness was too much. Ava Collins, watching from the side, whispered, "God, how many has he done this for?" The answer would come later, but not before something else happened. As Raymond turned back toward the terminal, one of the airport staff, a man in his 40s who had said nothing during the incident, stepped forward. He removed his badge, his tie, and said quietly, "My father died in Vietnam. He was returned in a box just like this." No one stood with him. No one walked him home. I never forgave this country for that. He looked at Raymond, eyes filling. Until now. He turned, faced the family, and said, I'm sorry. And then, in an act that no one had scripted, the staffer dropped to one knee. Not for show, for sorrow. He stayed there, head bowed, and others followed, a janitor, a security guard, an airline supervisor. One by one, the staff of Reagan National kneeled beside the road leading to the hearse. General Grant stood with her hands behind her back, unmoving, as tears rolled down her cheeks. She didn't stop them. She didn't need to. If you've been watching this far, ask yourself one question. When was the last time we truly honored someone without being told to? If this moment touched you, type promise kept in the comments. And if you believe this kind of dignity still matters, follow us for more. Because silence does not mean surrender. And sometimes the quietest march leaves the loudest echo. As Raymond stepped toward the vehicle, Ava caught up beside him. You could have told someone, she said. The media, the VA, the country, you could have. I wasn't doing it for them, Raymond replied. Then why, she asked. He stopped, turned toward the sunrise. For the ones who never got to come home, he said, and the ones who did, but were never welcomed. She stood still, stunned by the simplicity of it. Then out of the corner of her eye, Ava noticed Reed Marston watching from inside the terminal. Pale, still. Later that evening, Reed would submit a resignation letter to the VA and enclose a request for reassignment. Not because he was told to, because he needed to change. Because some days don't end with a clock out. They end with a reckoning. And Raymond, he didn't stay for thank yous. He didn't wave. He stepped into the front seat of the lead vehicle and closed the door. The engine started. But something stayed behind. An atmosphere, a lesson, and a name no one would ever mispronounce again. Raymond Decker, the forgotten man who walked a country back to its memory. The living symbol of honor, he didn't speak for 19 years until the day America listened. That sentence opened the front page of the Washington Post the following morning. Beneath it was a photo Raymond Decker standing in full dress blues, one hand resting on the flag-draped casket of Corporal Lucas West, the other hand bare placed gently over his heart. Behind him, an entire airport stood silent, heads bowed, hands over hearts. A woman kneeled in prayer. A janitor dropped his mop to salute. A Marine stood tall behind him, like a shadow of memory. But what mattered most wasn't the photo, it was the headline, and the fact that for the first time in 2 decades, the country remembered a man who never asked to be remembered at all. That morning calls flooded into the VA. Veterans from Mississippi to Montana asked, "Is he still alive?" Widows wrote, "He walked my husband home." We didn't know his name. A boy in Florida sent a message, "My dad used to hum Country Roads." I didn't understand why. I do now. But Raymond didn't read the headlines. He sat quietly on a bench just outside Arlington Cemetery, same posture, same silence. General Evelyn Grant approached slowly, heels clicking softly against the stone path. "Raymond," she said gently, "they want to give you the Medal of Honor." He didn't even blink. "I didn't earn that," he replied. She sat beside him. "You carried home 49 men. Some were barely old enough to shave. You never missed a ceremony, never broke the code. And you did it while the rest of the world thought you were dead." Raymond stared ahead, voice low. "They didn't carry my scars. They carried theirs." She reached into her coat pocket and handed him a letter. "This one's different," she said. "Read it." He unfolded the note. His hand still steady held the paper like a relic. It was from Reed Marston, the same VA staffer who had shoved him just days ago, the same man who had tried to remove him from the casket. Master Sergeant Decker, the letter began, I don't expect forgiveness. What I did was inexcusable. I saw an old man in the way, not a warrior, not a promise being fulfilled. I failed every man who's ever worn the uniform by what I did to you. I resigned from the VA today. I need to do better, and I will, because of you. Raymond folded the letter once then again. No smile, no anger, just silence. Sometimes, he said, a man doesn't need to be punished. He needs to be haunted. General Grant didn't speak. She knew better. Later that day, Ava Collins appeared, the flight attendant who'd watched the entire moment unfold. She brought with her a small camera crew, not for an interview, but to record something Raymond had never done. Talk. At first he said no. 3 times, then finally he asked one question. Will they listen? Ava nodded. And so he sat in a folding chair under a tree just outside Section 60. Behind him, rows and rows of marble headstones glowed white in the sun. He looked directly at the lens. I didn't carry them home because it was protocol, he began. I did it because they would have done it for me. He paused. Some people ask if I ever cried. Not once, because I gave them everything I had. I gave them silence, stillness, and I gave them a promise. He turned his head slightly, looking over his shoulder at the graves. I only wish someone had carried me back too. That clip, just 2 minutes long, was posted to the Department of Defense's YouTube channel that evening. It reached 4.2 million views in 24 hours. A group of high school students in Texas started a movement called One Last Walk to honor local veterans who died without family. They dressed in borrowed uniforms and stood silent beside caskets. They quoted Raymond Decker in every ceremony. The VA issued a new policy, the Decker Protocol, requiring every domestic military casket transfer to be accompanied by an escort trained and authorized, and never to be separated from the flag again. And Raymond, he never asked for any of it. He simply kept showing up. 3 months later, at a national memorial event in Washington, D.C., Raymond was asked to speak. He declined, but he agreed to attend. When his name was announced, he rose from his seat slowly. The crowd stood, not in applause, but in silence, respectful, raw, real. He walked to the podium, stared at the rows of faces, some young, some old, some still in uniform, others too broken to stand on their own. And he said this, I didn't come here to be honored. I came to remind you of the ones who never asked to be. He held up a folded flag. This is not a symbol of death, he said. It's a symbol of return, of promises made and kept. He left the stage to no fanfare, no band, just a soft breeze rustling the flags behind him. But before he stepped away, a young boy, maybe 9 years old, ran up and asked, Are you the man from the airport? Raymond knelt slowly. Yes. The boy blinked. My grandpa was a Marine too. Raymond nodded. Then you understand, he said softly. The boy hugged him without asking, and Raymond, for the first time in decades, hugged back. No one moved. Because no one wanted to forget what it looked like when honor came home. If you've watched until now, I ask you, truly ask you not to let this moment fade. There are Raymond Deckers all around us, silent, stoic, waiting to be remembered. If this story reminded you of someone, write their name in the comments. And if you believe dignity never expires, type never forgotten. This isn't just a story, it's a question. When was the last time you thanked a man who never asked to be thanked?